From ABC News, this is One on One with Greg Jackson and his guest, Maya Angelou.
She was raped at only 7 years old and later, as a teenager, worked briefly in a whorehouse to support a son. But she went on to become a performer, a poet, and a writer of remarkable books about her struggles. Our guest, Maya Angelou.
What poetry do you associate with how you feel right now? Is there a poem that comes to you?
Mm.
What have we stirred up?
Oh, so many. There's a poem. There's a poem which is a good woman feeling bad, because you almost made me weep on this thing 2 or 3 times. I guess I did weep.
How does that poem go?
Good woman feeling bad. The blues may be the life you've led, or midnight hours in an empty bed, but persecuting blues I've known could stalk like tigers and break like bone, pinned like rope in a gallows tree, make me curse my pedigree, bitterness thick on a rankling tongue, psalms to love left unsung, rivers heading north but ending south, funeral music and a going home mouth. All riddles are blues, and all blues are sad. And I'm just talking about some blues I've had.
What were you like as a very young child when all of us are truly formed?
Well, I was sent to Arkansas from California when I was 3, to a tiny, tiny town.
Named?
Stamps, Arkansas.
Stamps as in mail?
As in mail, aptly named. It was about that big, of the size of a 3-cent postage stamp. All small towns are provincial. I lived there from the time I was 3 until I was 13. And as long as I lived there, I was called by the black people Mrs. Henderson's California granddaughter. So I did not belong.
So what did you look like? What kind of kid were you?
Well, my eyes have a slant to them. And the black kids told me that my daddy was a Chinaman. And they used to tease me. So I didn't know anything about that. So I thought they meant that he was made out of china, like a cup or a plate or something. It was a terrible thing to say to somebody unknowing. But I had no mother and father. And
wait a minute. Who was taking care of it?
My grandmother.
Your mother and father had sent you to your grandmother?
Yes, that's right, from California. They had separated when I was 3. My grandmother owned the only black-owned store in the town, and she lived with her younger son, my uncle, who was crippled. And my brother and I, we lived in the store, in the back of the store.
That was really a world in itself?
It was a marvelous world in there.
Could you paint for me just a picture for a moment? Those of us from these big cities. What was it like of an afternoon or a morning? Who gathered? What was the mood of the place?
Well, it would depend on what season. In the summer season, the people who picked cotton would come about 4:30 in the morning, and my grandmother would get out of bed. I slept with her. My brother slept with my uncle. She would get out of bed and immediately down to the floor to pray, to thank God for letting her rise again, that her bed had not become her cooling board, that her blankets had not become her winding sheets, and she had one more chance. And I would lie in the bed while she prayed, and then I would get out of bed. I wasn't obliged to say morning prayers. Only the righteous say morning prayers. So I would get out of bed, and she'd light the lamp, and we would go into the kitchen part of the store and wash, and then go and open up the store. And the people would come in the morning in that light, which was gray, but not gray flat, gray rich gray light. With
Into this little country store?
Into the country store. And they'd come in bragging, you know, about how much cotton they were going to pick that day, and they would buy large slabs of cheese if they had money, or peanut patties, which are just the brown sugar and peanuts, which are very high, of course, in sugar, but also high in protein. And sometimes people would buy sardines and a box of crackers, and that would be for lunch, you see. In the evening, the people would come home, and the light would be different. They would be driven back to the store in flatbed trucks where everybody stood up. And all that gaiety and hope and promise of the morning, which went with the morning light, had seeped away through the day. And their shoulders were down and over like that. And they drag out of the trucks and drag across the yard. And their voices, the lightness that had been in the morning, and the teasing, which is so sweet among black people, the teasing of the morning was gone. And it would just be, well, Sister Henderson, I'm back. Yes, it sure was hot out there. And it would seem as if not only had they lost the spirit, but that they had lost texture. Texture was gone. And during the years when I really noticed, I was a mute. I had stopped talking when I was about 7.5, and didn't really talk again until I was about 12.5.
Really? Why did you stop talking?
Well, when I was about 7, I was taken to St. Louis to visit my mother. And I was there a few months, and I was raped.
By whom?
By my mother's then boyfriend. And my brother came to me, he was just about 9, and he asked me who did it. I wouldn't tell anyone else, of course. And I told him, if I tell, the man will kill you. And I believed anything he said, you see. He said, he can't kill me. I will not let him kill me. So I believed him, so I told him. And of course he told my mommy. And the man was found dead.
He'd been murdered?
Yes. I never said that word. He'd been killed. I don't know what, I'm not trying to make the point that there's a fine line between that, but I've never used that word. And it was bad enough that he'd been killed. And I thought that my voice itself had killed him.
Isn't that amazing as youngsters how we get...
I know.
You think you're part of a Chinese porcelain, and now that was your voice and
yes.
killed this guy
yes.
who, in fact, had raped you.
Yeah.
But
so I thought
is the world.
If I spoke, I could just kill anybody.
What a weight to carry.
So I just stopped talking for 5 years. But I watched. And of course, my mother couldn't, in St. Louis, she couldn't talk me out of not talking. Mm-hmm. She did everything she could. She tried to entertain me and amuse me, and she's very pretty and very funny and cheerful and all that, but I couldn't. So she didn't know what to do with me. So she sent me back to my grandmother. And the people in the town, of course, no one knew what had happened, but my grandmother and my uncle. And they said that I was crazy, that I was retarded. Poor thing, Sister Henderson's grandchild just went crazy. She's mental, you know. And my grandmother would braid my hair, and she'd say, Sister, I know they think you're crazy, that you'll never talk. But when you get ready, and the Lord gets ready, you're going to talk, sister. You're going to be a preacher. Mama knows.
When we left off now, you've been returned to your grandmother. You're mute.
Yes.
But you obviously spoke again.
Yes.
How'd that happen?
Well, I started to read, of course, and really to read when I was I was reading early and helping in the store and all that. But I started to read books, I guess, at about 8. And there was a woman in my town, Mrs. Flowers. She was black. She was so beautiful. She was that color black, whether it's red under the black, so that it looks purple. You know, if the sun touches it a certain way, it's so gorgeous.
Do black folks call that a certain color?
Well, that could be blue black or plum black. In describing the person's color, we call people cinnamon, toast, pomegranate. Somebody may be called ginger, honey-colored.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What do they call you?
Well, I'd be honey-colored. Oh, they call me brown skin. Or, anyway, but Mrs. Flowers, she had this beautiful skin and beautiful teeth. As the black poet, 19th century poet, says, her teeth were like flags of truce. I mean, just so white. Oh, God, she was lovely. And she wore voile, which was a fabric in the 30s. It was like a cotton chiffon. And she'd walk.
In this little town
in this tiny little town. And when I'd see her coming up the road, I just thought she was the prettiest thing God had made so far. And she took me to the library in the segregated school and told me, I want you to read from A to CH by the time I come back. And she'd go to the exotic metropolis of Pine Bluff. And I would read everything. I would understand, you know, whatever I could, but I would read. And I found poetry. Oh, I loved it so.
What poem? What poem
comes?
Oh,
everybody. I loved Paul Laurence Dunbar so much.
Does it still stick with you?
Oh, yes. Mr. Dunbar, I took the title of my first book from Sympathy, a poem of Mr. Dunbar's. He says, I know what the caged bird feels, alas, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind blows soft through the springing grass, and the river floats like a stream of glass, when the first bird sings, and the first bud opes, and the faint perfume from its chalice steals. I know what the caged bird feels. Oh, I loved him. And I loved Shakespeare.
Now, this is an 8-9-year-old child at this point.
But, you know...
mute, and you've obviously gone into your own soul.
Yes.
And the world's being refashioned from those silent eyes.
Yes. I would just eat up sound in my eyes. Just listen to everybody. I loved Edgar Allan Poe, who I called Eep to myself. And I memorized.
Now, Mrs. Flowers got you into this. You're still not speaking to anyone. What about brother?
Yes. I could speak to Bailey.
Okay.
But then...
Brother's name Bailey. Yes. But we're not even speaking to grandmother.
No. And that was her, shows how great she was. Mm-hmm. But Mrs. Flowers, after about 2 years, I guess, she started telling me that I would never love poetry. She said, until I heard it over, felt it, across my tongue, through my teeth, across my lips, I would never love poetry. And it was as if my best friend was being threatened, you know.
In hindsight, how truly sophisticated psychiatrically what's going on here. I mean, these folks really knew.
That's right.
That this poor, young, abused black girl needed. And they found a way.
Yep.
You ended up leaving the town.
Yes.
You're on your way into the grown-up world. And now, I guess I was quite surprised to discover that you had a child.
When I was about 15, I was 6 foot tall. I was an A student, and I was very skinny, and I would seem never to, it seemed as if I would never develop breasts or any curves or anything. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I just had bumps. It was like a long brown cucumber with bumps. It was so awful. And I thought, maybe I'm going to be a lesbian.
My, how these things get in our minds, huh?
But they do, you know.
Yeah. You were a china teacup, and then you didn't speak, and now we're going to be a lesbian.
Well, I had this heavy voice, and I wasn't developing like other girls. So there was a fellow who was only a few years older than I.
Just a boy.
Yeah. Who had often, you know, stopped me in the street or tried to stop me, and I walked as my grandmother walked. Straight ahead. And I thought, well, maybe I will find out. All the girls I knew in the school were much more sophisticated than I and much more adventurous. And they would talk about this and that. So I decided to try it.
So is it, see here, my good man? I'm now ready?
Something like that.
Really? Almost.
Yeah. And I thought, is that all?
I'm sure you're not the first teenager that ever asked that, do you think?
I don't think so.
But from that one occasion you had a son?
Yes.
Ah.
The most magnificent adventure, accomplishment of my life is my son. Yeah.
I had said in the introduction, which you didn't hear for a while briefly, you worked in a house of prostitution to raise your child?
Well, I didn't. I mean, I had one.
You owned one?
Yeah.
Or ran one?
Ran one. I was
just
about
said
18.
Worked in one.
Yeah, well, what does one do?
You were a madam.
Yes, when I was 18 for about 2 months. I had been on the street. Had been on the street, yes. When I was 18. I also was the first black person at all on the streetcars in San Francisco.
I mean, as a conductor?
Conductorette was the name, please. Thank you. I had my own money changer. I had a cap with a bib on it.
And that was a big deal.
Ooh, that was hard.
I mean, the white folks didn't want to even let you have that job?
No. But anyway, I got it.
Then how, thinking about it now, how does one that came from that beginning, which anyone could hide behind forever and say, given that disadvantage, how could you expect me to succeed? What made you?
Well, now mind you, it must be said that when I was 14, I got a scholarship to a college. So I went to high school in the day and to college at night. And I took dance and drama. So when I started, I guess about 20, I started to teach dance and started to sing for a living. I had a job once as a shake dancer, which
What's
was
that?
really...
What's that?
The shake dancer was the...
Is that the go-go dancer?
Oh, yes, but long before. And I worked in a strip joint. There were 4 of us, 3 strippers and me. And the strippers were white. And I didn't strip. I was too nice to strip. I wore a costume that if you balled it up, you could put it in a penny matchbox, that 2 spangles and a twirl or something like that.
But you didn't strip all of it.
But I... And the 4 of us danced from 8 until 2, every hour, 15 minutes an hour. So the other ladies would go out and they go, tee, 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 tee. But I would hit it. I would go out and dance. And the band was black. All the musicians were black. And they'd been used to kung, kung, ka-tung, 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 kung, ka-tung, ka-tung. So I came in and asked for Caravan and all sorts of exotic songs, which meant that they had to work. So it was a while before they really liked me, but after a while I would try to cut them. That is, I would try to do, some double rhythms, and which would make them have to, try to cut me. And they'd double up and triple up and play 5/4s and things like that. And so we began to enjoy it. I really liked it.
What poetry do you associate with how you feel right now? Is there a poem that comes to you?
Mm.
What have we stirred up?
Oh, so many. There's a poem. It's a very there's a poem which is a good woman feeling bad, because you almost made me weep on this thing 2 or 3 times. I guess I did weep.
How does that poem go?
Good woman feeling bad. The blues may be the life you've led, or midnight hours in an empty bed, but persecuting blues I've known could stalk like tigers and break like bone, pinned like rope in a gallows tree, make me curse my pedigree. Bitterness thick on a rankling tongue, psalms to love left unsung, rivers heading north but ending south, funeral music in a going home mouth. All riddles are blues, and all blues are sad. And I'm just talking about some blues I've had.
I made you feel that way?
Thinking about all those things, all those people.
Would...
And when I think about the girl I was, you know, I'm amazed that I made it. You ask me, how did I do it? I have no idea. I can't believe it. I feel so sorry for her.
That little girl?
Yeah.
Little Marguerite. When you started.
Yeah.
No bigger around than your baby finger.
Yeah.
Do you ever see her in your mind's eye? You ever feel like her again?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Some men can make me feel like that.
I'm Greg Jackson. There seems so much to the story that we've only begun to scratch the proverbial surface. So for our next program, we've asked our guest to return, an encore with Maya Angelou.
This has been One on One, a pre-recorded presentation of ABC News. From ABC News, this is One on One with Greg Jackson and his guest Maya Angelou.
We continue with Maya Angelou. Earlier, she told us about growing up in a small southern town, about being raped at the age of 7, and later as a teenager working briefly in a brothel. But she went on to become a performer, a poet, and a world-famous writer. How did she do it? We go on with our conversation.
Billie Holiday told me that I was going to be famous. She said I wouldn't be famous for singing, which was obvious. But she said, you're going to be famous, but remember, you can't get so high, somebody won't try to bring you down. So, what my great aspiration, my greatest ambition, is to be so good. Now, in that way, I'm tiresome, as I suppose, to live with, because I want to be a fantastic human being. But let me come back to a question you asked about getting over a rape. No one ever, as far as I know.
I hope it didn't sound that foolish. I didn't mean to say you get over it.
I know what you mean.
Okay.
I do know what you mean. And many people who have not gone through it, even if someone in their families have had this violation, they cannot know how desolate the affront leaves the victim. Absolutely desolate. And now, at this age, which is what the French call a certain age.
Your current age.
My current age. I am, I suppose, the most read black female writer in the world. My books are required reading at every university or college in this country. I speak 7 languages. I'm a Chubb Fellow at Yale University. And I think at present I have about 17 honorary doctorates. I have the Reynolds Chair at Wake Forest University.
As a professor?
I'm a professor at Wake Forest.
Which, ironically enough, is in the South.
Yes, good.
Go on.
With all that, saying that, and I'm financially secure, saying that there isn't one day of my life that I haven't thought about it. Not one. I have had to use an incredible amount of energy to keep balance in my life. Incredible amount. If I hadn't had to do that, I might have written 10 more books or 5 more films. I don't know. So, okay, next, go on. Next question.
It's such a leap to be fluent in 7 languages, to be a university professor, to be the most widely read black woman writer in the world. And at this point, I suppose we're asking, God, how'd she do it?
When I've told you I hadn't stopped reading, I think that is...
Well, lots of people keep reading. So, what?
Now, wait, you're not listening. When one reads, if you do, you can truly begin the process of educating yourself, not just about the who's and where's and at what time and the sites, but really to understand who one is. That is the value.
I suppose we're so accomplishment-oriented. One has to make that first step, where you said, I am not anybody's lackey. I am Maya, who is going to go on to what you've accomplished.
Well, I didn't think that. I
know.
thought I was going to become a very successful real estate broker. I really did. I wanted to have a suit, gabardine, snakeskin shoes, a snakeskin purse, light beige or white gloves, which you never really put on. You just sort of held them, and a briefcase. I hadn't the faintest idea of real estate, but I saw myself as this executive.
You said something else once, that one needs noble heroes. Was that your grandmother?
Heroes and sheroes.
And sheroes.
Yes.
Was that your grandmother?
Yes, my grandmother.
Can one succeed without?
I don't know. I don't know if the hero or shero has to be a human being. It can be a great idea. It can be a gesture. It can be a literature, which is a hero, shero. It can be music. It can be art, painting.
There must be the other side of you. We've seen the highly accomplished one who overcame obvious setbacks.
Still am overcoming.
On the other hand, my instincts would tell me you'd be a tough person to live with. I think, I suspect that your strong-willed would be an understatement.
I don't think so. I don't think...
How many husbands have you had?
Enough for the time being.
Is there going to be a more?
Are you asking?
Well, I don't mean to be cheeky, but
I mean...
I guess I am.
Oh, I see. Are you asking me directly?
I guess I was asking not just voyeuristically, but how it would affect. Can one live like yourself with all the professions? What happens when you write, for example? I read somewhere was it your mother who said, when Maya starts to write, she becomes obsessed with it?
Well, I suppose I do. I don't know about obsessed. I don't think my mother would say that. But I go away. I keep a hotel room.
Really?
I keep a hotel room, and I leave for it about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I go into it. I try to be at work by 7. I keep a dictionary, Roget's Thesaurus, a Bible, cigarettes, bottle of sherry, and playing cards. And I stay in there until 12:30, writing, longhand. If the work is going well, I'll stay longer. But if it's going horribly, I don't leave. Now...
It's mostly about your own life, your past, by and large.
Well, whatever I'm writing, I mean, I may be writing a screenplay, but I go to work. Hawthorne says easy reading is damned hard writing. So I go to work. I realize it is work that I'm going to. This is not, I'm waiting for the light bulb to go off over my head so dig like I can feel where I'm coming. I don't do that. I go to work. Now, when I was married, I would get home and wash, because when you write, you sweat. It's hard work. And see that the house is lovely and fresh flowers, and I'm a cook. That is my hobby. So I would prepare for dinner, change, and be looking nice, I hope, when my husband would return, and try to be present with him, try to be existential. Now, it is true that a part of my mind is, you know, pulling off that way, but I don't think I'm hard to live with.
Your book in Cage Birds, you always describe as Negro. You don't say black.
Well, but that was talking about a time when Negro was fashionable. We have gone through many many titles: Negro, colored, Afro-American, you know. So I was writing about a time when black people were called Negroes.
But when you think of Mrs. Flowers, black. Isn't it curious that our discussion revolves so much around white and black? You named all of those degrees of color that, but in fact, in terms of accomplishment, it doesn't have anything to do with it. It isn't the mind and there's no talent. Nothing means anything.
Well, I tell you, if you take two people, if they both start at the same place and elevate, ascend, then you can say, that's all the same thing. But if you take a person who has been here and one who has started here, there's a difference. There's a world of difference, because you think to yourself, listen, had you come from as far as I've come, you should be president of the world, my dear.
I'm not so sure you're not going to be.
No. You see what I mean, though? Sure. That's what makes one has to see the relative
You're saying
progress.
Down there, you're female, you're black, and from the rural South.
That's right.
Can't start much lower, is that what you're saying?
It's hard to, you know. I might have been Spanish speaking.
Is there the slightest possibility? The white folks, myself, can truly understand the black experience.
Oh, I think to the degree that it's necessary to understand.
Well, you once said that black folks should play white folks in plays and what, because you've been studying white folks for hundreds of years.
Yes.
But that the white folks don't understand, you know.
Very seldom have had to. You see, it's like the Cockneys in Britain, in England in particular. The aristocrats and the upper class and the upper middle class controlled so much of life that the Cockney developed a way of watching that person and can imitate him to a fine degree. One has only to see the current, look at Finney or some of the current English actors who can imitate the upper class and upper middle class to a degree so finely honed that they can put it over. For blacks in this country, for centuries, the wave of a white woman's hand might reveal that she is getting ready to sell one's children. Or a frown on a white man's face could mean in a moment you're about to be flogged. So people learn to watch.
There's a poem about facing always with a grin.
Oh, when I think about myself.
Is that the story of the blacks? The face that...
Well, people had to learn to laugh when they weren't tickled and to scratch when they didn't itch.
Black folks did.
Black folks did.
Have you ever considered, this may just sound ludicrously simple, but why did white folks, where you grew up, how could they and why would they hate somebody like your grandmother? Why would they hate black people?
Because they're frightened.
Why? You didn't have guns.
I know, but people are afraid, for one thing, that basically, people are afraid to die. That is basic. I'm coming to it. Let me explain. Basically, people are afraid to die. So they clutch to something which they think will preserve their lives. So they try to guarantee happiness to themselves by shunting dirt and misery off on someone else. That's Sterling Brown. Sterling Brown's poem, The Strong Men. People feel, if I can keep them out of this building, them off this street, them out of this employment line, I'll live a little longer. They don't think it consciously, but that is fundamental. People are afraid to be pried loose from their ignorance because they know their ignorance so well, they know it better than they know their body odors. And if you say, come on, give up your ignorance, they get into that terrible position, terrifying position which Shakespeare talks about at the end of the soliloquy, Hamlet's soliloquy. They'd rather bear the ills they have than fly to others that they know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all. So they are cowardly.
As a 8 or 9, 10-year-old mute black girl in Arkansas, you surely didn't know all that. What did you think of black and white at the time? What did you think of white folks as a
I
young
didn't think they were real. I didn't think they were real people.
Really?
I thought they were white folks.
What?
I thought they were white folks.
Well, I mean, what do you mean you didn't think they're real? You don't think they had arms and legs?
Oh, no, they had arms and legs, but they didn't have innards like other people. I thought if you put your hand on a white person, it would go right through.
No.
I promise you. They were white folks. We were people.
You were that distant from them? I mean,
absolutely.
Well, I mean, you live scarcely 300 yards apart in some respects.
Oh, and my grandmother owned the land most of them lived on. But they weren't real. I mean, they were so rude. Nice people like us. I mean, we were the real folks. People said, "Evening. How you doing? Fine, thank you. I sure appreciate it. Yes, ma'am."
But not white folks?
White folks, no. And they'd come into the store and act as if they had credit and order my crippled uncle around, you know. So I knew that if they were real people, they'd be nice.
You returned after all of this time. You've returned to the South. I presume to live there forever. Back to North Carolina. I mean, you've gone to North Carolina. You said Wake Forest. I would think, were I you, and obviously I don't understand anything, that'd be the last place I'd go back to, was the South.
Really?
Well, you wrote of it as such pain and heaping such indignities on blacks in general and you in particular.
Yes, but there's very little difference, really. I mean, between Atlanta and New York. John Killen says Atlanta is down south, New York is up south. You know.
It wasn't a big step to go home to the South for you?
It was big, but I have not exchanged anything. I've bought a really lovely house with about 40 dogwood trees and pecan trees and oaks and
do you ever think you'd be living like that in the South? I mean, in your wildest imagination early on as a teenager?
As a teenager, I was going to be this successful real estate broker. Of course I would live like that. My mother, I grew up in a 14-room house, so why shouldn't I? Once I understood that...
a 14-rooming house, too.
Well, she rented out some rooms upstairs, but it was her house, 14 rooms.
This is in San Francisco.
San Francisco. I've long believed that the best there is to have is the best for me. And I believe that the best there is to be is the best for me. I'd like to be the very best.
Somewhere I read that you mentioned, I think it was Billie Holiday, you said, don't get too high to be brought down. Do you remember what that was about?
Yes, Billie Holiday told me that I was going to be famous. She said I wouldn't be famous for singing, which was obvious. But she said, you're going to be famous, but remember, you can't get so high, somebody won't try to bring you down. So, what my great aspiration, my greatest ambition, is to be so good. Now, in that way, I'm tiresome, as I suppose, to live with, because I want to be a fantastic human being.
You haven't done bad so far.
Inside myself. Inside. So that it is more than talk. It is really reflex action. It is truly instinct. Paraphrasing Mr. Hayden, but that's my dream.
How far off are you from the dream?
Well, I'm on the road. I blow it, you know. I blow it, damn it, I blow it. But I want to be a Christian. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart. That's the truth.
You grew up in that. Is it that we don't really understand the role of the church in Stamps, Arkansas, I'll bet you. I mean, that wasn't just something you went to on Sunday.
Oh, no. It is that...
You dressed up as a little girl, and it's an all day?
It's all... Oh, but trying to be a Christian is like trying to be a good Jew, a good Muslim, a good friend, or a lover. It's not a condition you achieve, and then you sit back and say, oh, well, I got that, I'm cool now. You know, it's every day, you're just back at it. And trying to be it internally.
What was it
Not
like?
You know, one of the problems oftentimes when whites imitate blacks in a religious setting, it's all external. It's all, hey, they think they... Now, the black person who does the same gesture looks differently. Because it is from inside out. It's the spirit moving. It is really the spirit itself moving outside, or moving the body itself. So what I want to be is not, I want my gestures, my actions to display what I am inside. That's what I want.
It's so rooted, what you've described as part of America in the rural South. But you spent some time in Egypt, you spent some time in Africa.
And in Europe, yeah.
What was it like being an American black woman in Africa and in those Arab countries? Is there a sense of going home at all
no,
to Africa?
Not yes, in Ghana.
Yes.
But not in Egypt.
No, but in Ghana. Did you feel comfortable? I mean,
yes.
Was this home?
Yes, it was the first time I've ever felt at home. It was in Ghana. And curiously enough, the second time in my life I've ever felt at home is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Where you are right now?
Where I am right now. I have no way of explaining it. I have never had family to live there. I have no connection with North Carolina. But I feel myself at home.
Well, Maya Angelou, perhaps you've gone home.
Maybe.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
This has been One on One, a pre-recorded presentation of ABC News.